Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London, and today I'm looking at the Red Book for 2021. It's this book here. It's the Family Court Practice for 2021. It's the Bible for us as family law practitioners, and if you are actually at the family law bar or a solicitor involved in advising clients concerning family matters, this is the book you have to have. It's published by LexisNexis Family Law, and we've given it a title for the current review for this year, The Definitive Guide for Family Practitioners, now in a new edition. And it's an annual edition, of course, which is important to bear in mind. Let's have a look at it first of all again, before I tell you what's new for this year. There's the front of it. Then at the spine you can see the name of the people who've actually been involved in it. Their general editor is Anthony Cleary, and there are some 15 contributors in total. There's nothing on the back as such. What you do have in the back of the book is a summary of fees in the back cover. Very helpful. Just to stay on the front cover, you've got diaries. So that's quite, again, very helpful indeed, because it's always quite useful to know which dates we're talking about, especially if we're looking at a specific, say for instance in a child arrangement matter, you might be looking at specific dates. Now look at the index. It's a very detailed index by paragraph numbering. You can see the paragraph numbering down the sides, and you can see it's a very substantial index. As I say, this hasn't changed much. The style is the same as it's always been, but obviously there have been some fairly substantial changes. You can see references are to paragraph number. You can see that. There's some nice little dividers here depending on what you're looking for. And you have right at the back European international material. Now if I go to the front of the book, as I say, you have the actual calendars there. Then you have, after that, the basic information. There's the front, effective front page, with LexisNexis to the fore. Then you've got all the blurb, usual stuff about the book. Then you've got the names of the contributors. A lot of people, some of the people you will know, still very active people, some of whom I've been in front of, and in fact they're extremely experienced people. The consulting editor is Lady Black, who's a former Justice of the Supreme Court. Then you get to a brand new preface, which was actually the original preface from Mrs Justice Bracewell when it first came out. Then we get the introduction, more of in a minute. There it is there. That actually is dated May 2021 for the preface by Anthony Cleary. Then you've got the contents section. You can see the structure of it as usual. You've got preface, introduction, abbreviations, statutes, statutory instruments, the CPR, table of practice directions, table of cases. Then you've got the various parts, which are split into 6 parts: procedural guides, statutes, procedure rules, SIs, practice guidance, PGs, and European and international material at the back. You've also got the shaded areas, which you can probably just make out there, which are also quite useful because that you can go immediately to what you're looking for. So for instance, the guides themselves are at the front there, and then the big shaded area, which you can see there, is actually statutes. For instance, the classic one we all use is the Children Act 1989. Then you've got the next big shaded area is actually the family procedurals. You can see I've just started in on that. See the family procedurals. You can see the structure throughout with the paragraph numbering and the various notes that are attached to each of the paragraph numbers. So it's most important because that is where we as practitioners find our information. Then you've got statutory instruments, and then you've got the practice guidance, the PGs, the practice guidance notes, and then right at the end you've got the European material and international material. All in all, another extremely fine book. As I've indicated to many people in previous reviews of this title, this is the ultimate book when it comes to knowing what to do and how to go about what you're looking for. Obviously, we've been through a very difficult period in legal history with the closure of the courts and many of the hearings being by Zoom. More of that in a minute. But that's the new book. It came out earlier this year. I'm recording this in the autumn of 2021. We're about halfway through, and obviously the next edition will come out sometime in the middle of 2022. But what do Elizabeth and I say about the book? As I say, do read our previous reviews and you'll see how we've approached this particular edition, because when the family court practice was first published in the early 2000s, around about 2003, something like that, it was lauded and applauded as a new and an innovative, I'll get it right, publication, and one that we needed, because even at that time the rules were really quite different, and I was much earlier in practice at that time than I am now, and things have changed so much in that time. Now, of course, no less than 28 years on, it's still here and with us, and you will see it in every court, and I take it to every court for every hearing I have. The reason for that is because you never quite know what could well arise. There are useful pointers throughout if there are any difficult areas, but I have to say in quite a lot of practice at the family law bar, there is not that much in the way of very pure law involved. It's much more about procedural issues, facts, and trying to work out what is in the cases I do with children, anyway, the child arrangement orders, trying to work out what is in the best interests of the child. And of course, it is one of those books which is distinguished and a thorough work of reference, and remains, in our view, forever young, you might say, because it's always authoritative and it's always up to date. And they've tried very hard, bearing in mind the difficulties we've had, because it's now in a new edition, as I say, for the calendar year. We're saying 2021, and it normally appears in the late spring. But it remains the family practitioner's best friend in our view. And to quote Mrs Justice Bracewell in the original preface, it's been designed to meet the need for a definitive work of reference covering the entire range of family proceedings at every level of court. That, of course, now includes the concept of the family court and, of course, financial remedies court. These are changes which are taking place as I speak. And she also commented at that time that the family court practice would be updated annually to reflect developments in law and practice, having been accepted as a standard book of reference for judges and practitioners throughout the jurisdiction. And so it remains. And of course, this new edition, as you would expect, reflects and comments upon the monumental and often startling changes to the legal profession generally, as wrought by the pandemic, or as General Editor Anthony Cleary whimsily describes it, Storm COVID. We've got a lot of words for this dreadful thing that's happened to us, but I think that's it encompasses it, and I'll show what he says about that in a bit more detail at the end of this review. His remarks about what has happened to the justice system during and post-COVID will strike more than a few responsive chords and perhaps a round of applause amongst users of this text, especially when Cleary remarks that almost 1 in every 2 responses from parents and young people expressed confusion and dissatisfaction with remote hearings, often to the extent of simply not understanding the process. And that, unfortunately, is what's happened. And I say that as someone who's been forced to use the cloud video platform. I've been refused a right to have an attended party's hearing. It makes things very much more difficult. It's very unsatisfactory from the point of the client. It's also extremely difficult to actually talk, as you have to do in these circumstances, in many cases, to the other side, because you do really need to have some sort of engagement and some sort of contact with your opposite number to try and work out how you're going to deal with the matter without having a very straight fight in terms of the no longer the inquisitorial but more the accusatorial system, which to my mind really does not work very well in the family jurisdiction, though I know that I'm not alone in that view. Clearly, of course, Cleary and no doubt the 15 expert contributors on the editorial team harbour serious reservations about online hearings, as I do, in the family courts. I'm not happy with them at all, and I make that very clear. However, we are where we are, and we are still getting, thanks to civil servants in HMCTS, decisions made about where we will have them, whether we like it or not, as CVP hearings. That's simply not acceptable, in my view, to practitioners, because we are the ones who actually have to explain everything to the client. The judge can be there, and he has a lot of sympathy, I think, as well, because one of the difficulties with any form of CVP hearing is you lose connections. It's very, very difficult to take any form of instruction during the hearing as well from the client. That's another drawback. So it's small wonder then that this text continues to be regarded as the Bible for family law amongst family law practitioners. But of course what we've got is people who are on our side who are actually contributing and trying to make our lives as easy as possible. It's got about 3,000 pages, this current book, and it's divided into the 6 parts I showed you earlier. That's the procedural guides, statutes, CPR, or actually the FPR, statutory instruments, the practice guidance, and of course the European and international material. And it's useful to note the extensive table of statutes, SIs and PDs plus the tables for the CPR, the FPR, and the old Supreme Court practice directions. Because while I come from that era pre the procedure rules, we still have a little bit of a knock-on effect from the past. And of course, to aid navigation, you've got this massive index at the back. Let me sum up by saying that practitioners involved in this particularly sombre, complex and sensitive area of law will certainly appreciate the invaluable assistance offered by what is an erudite and authoritative text. And it comes to us from the real experts, the people who make the law in this field. And the date of publication is cited as at May 2021. Let me just show the book again. There it is. There's the front and the spine. As you see, there's nothing on the back. The spine there with the names. I just want to show you finally the actual preface. He calls it an introduction. It's there. Now do read that, because if you are using this book, what Anthony Cleary has done, and I'm not going to go through this in detail, but do read it, is he's set out the concerns he has, some of which I've mentioned in this review. And he talks about the problems with the Treasury, he talks about the problems with what we call private law children matters, and the problem, again, with legal aid. Now, as I talk about this matter, legal aid may well be changing a little bit, because there is an increase in money for the Ministry of Justice budget. There's also one other thing that he does mention which has now changed, and that is that what was the domestic violence bill is now an act of Parliament. It's down as the domestic abuse bill. Domestic abuse bill. It's now actually an act of Parliament, and it was given royal assent a little earlier this year. So that is now in force, and I'd expect to see more about that in the next edition in 2022. I'm not going to talk much about the case law, because there is a little bit of new case law which is relevant, but generally speaking, I think Anthony has covered everything that you need to know about what's been happening during this really very, very strange period in our legal and professional lives. I'd like to thank LexisNexis extremely much. Very, very pleased indeed that they continue to publish this under the imprint of family law. We do rely on these publications to make our lives easy, because this particular area of law, which merges law with a lot of emotion and a lot of factual information, which is quite often in dispute, it is extremely useful to have something like this that will help us, because when there are really big disputes, and I don't get that many because we get agreements, But when we do, we then get down to the strict rules, and then that's when the problems really start. And I do find this to be of great help. So thank you to all. Bye-bye.